Is this the man who decided my mom can't keep her house? The little girl asked the bank's regional director, standing in the parking lot of the credit union in the rain. Dominic Bauer heard it before he saw her. He was halfway to his car, keys already in hand, when the voice stopped him. Small. Flat. Not angry. Which somehow made it worse. He turned around. She was maybe 7 years old. Strawberry blonde hair in 2 braids, one coming undone. Yellow rain jacket, 2 sizes too big, the sleeves swallowing her hand so only her fingertips showed. She was holding a paper coffee cup, the kind from a gas station, with both hands. Not drinking it, just holding it. A woman stood a few feet behind the girl, her hand pressed flat against the hood of an old Civic. She wasn't trying to stop the child. She was watching Dominic with the careful, controlled expression of someone who has run out of panic and arrived at something quieter and more durable. Dominic Bauer, Regional Director of Cornerstone Trust Financial, had been in banking for 19 years. He had sat across from crying couples. He had signed foreclosure extensions and denied appeals and approved them. He had learned it was something you had to learn or you left the industry, how to hold people's worst days at a professional distance. He was good at it. He looked at the little girl and he felt the distance close without asking permission. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she said. "What's yours?" "Dominic." The letter said, "Cornerstone Trust," Lily said. She looked at the logo on his car. Then back at him. "That's you." It was not a question. The rain was getting heavier. Dominic's umbrella was still in his hand, not open. He looked at the woman by the car. She had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep was going to fix quickly. She wore a fleece jacket over a uniform shirt, the pale green of a long-term care facility. Her name tag read, Margot. "I'm sorry," he said to her. The professional version of sorry, the one that means I understand this is difficult. Margot Vaillancourt looked at him steadily. "She heard me on the phone this morning," she said. Her voice was even. "She's been asking questions all day." "Mom didn't cry when she read the letter," Lily said, to no one in particular. "She only cries at night, when she thinks I'm asleep." The parking lot was empty except for them. The street lights had just come on, even though it was only 5:30. November in Hamilton, Ontario does that. Just pulls the light out of the afternoon without warning. Dominic opened his umbrella and held it over the little girl. Lily looked up at it, then at him. She didn't say thank you. She didn't move closer. She just continued holding her gas station coffee cup with both hands, standing in the fraction of dry air he'd made available to her. "You should go inside," Margaret said quietly to Lily. "It's cold." "I want to talk to the man," Lily said. Dominic crouched down. Suit pants, wet pavement. He didn't think about it. He just did it. "Okay," he said. "Talk." Lily considered him with the unsettling seriousness of a child who has had to grow her thinking fast. "Our house has a purple door," she said. "Grandma painted it. She said purple doors mean the family inside doesn't give up." She paused. "Are you going to make us give up our purple door?" Dominic had no answer prepared for that. In 19 years, no one had ever asked him about a purple door. He stood up slowly. He looked at Margot. "Can we go inside?" he asked, out of the rain. Margot's jaw tightened. She was measuring something, whether this was worth it, whether letting him into her orbit would cost more than it gave. Then she looked at Lily, who was watching her with complete trust, and she nodded once. The Cornerstone Trust branch was closed. Dominic used his key fob to let them in through the side entrance, past the ATM vestibule into the small waiting area with its low chairs and a water cooler that hummed. He turned on the overhead lights. Margot sat down on the edge of a chair like someone who had learned not to get too comfortable. Lily climbed up beside her and leaned her head against her mother's arm, still holding the coffee cup. Dominic pulled a chair to face them. He didn't sit behind a desk. "Tell me what happened," he said. Margot looked at him. The expression on her face was not gratitude. It was calculation, figuring out if explaining herself was a dignity she could afford. "The mortgage is my grandmother's," she said finally. "Was. She passed 18 months ago. I inherited the house. I also inherited the debt. I've been making payments every month on time." She paused. In September, my hours got cut at the care home. They said it was a staffing restructure. I work nights. I have a second job at a grocery distribution center, mornings. She stopped again, pressing her lips together. In October, I was 2 weeks late, 14 days. I called the branch to explain. I was told to submit a hardship request form. Did you submit it? I submitted it 3 times, Marco said. Once online, once by fax. They told me to fax it. Once in person to a woman at this counter who stapled my supporting documents herself. A beat. Each time I was told there was no record of the previous submission. Dominic was quiet. In November, I received the notice of intention to enforce security, Margot said. The phrase was flat and clinical in her mouth, which meant she'd read it enough times to drain all the feeling from it. 14 days late, that's why. How long have the payments been on time before that? Dominic asked. 16 months. He looked down at his hands. I'm not behind now, Margot continued. I borrowed from my sister to catch up. The notice should be void. But no one at the call center can confirm that. Every time I call, I get someone different. Every time I explain, they say they'll escalate. Nothing happens. Her voice had not changed in pitch or speed through any of this. That kind of steadiness, Dominic had learned, was not composure. It was exhaustion wearing composure's clothes. I came here today to try to speak to someone in person. I was told the branch manager was unavailable. She looked at him. I was walking to my car when Lily asked you her question. I heard it, he said. Lily had fallen asleep against her mother's arm. The gas station coffee cup was on the floor, still mostly full. Dominic sat with the quiet for a moment. He thought about the notice of intention, a standard enforcement instrument. His team processed dozens a month. 14 days, 1 missed call returned, 1 form received, 1 flag on the file, and Margot Vilecourt's name would have stayed out of the enforcement queue entirely. Instead, it had moved through the pipeline the way water moves through a pipe, not because anyone chose it, but because nothing stopped it. He asked her to spell her full name. He took out his phone and pulled up the client management system. The file came up in 30 seconds. He looked at it for a long time. There are 3 hardship submissions in this file, he said. All marked received, all marked as pending secondary review. He scrolled down. None of them were assigned to a case officer. Margot said nothing. They were received, Dominic said. They were just never actioned. I know, Margot said. I know that. What I don't know is what I'm supposed to do about it. He had no answer for that either. Not a good one. Not one that didn't sound like the system explaining itself to the person it had just ground down. I'm going to action it now, he said. Tonight? The freeze on enforcement, yes, tonight. He was already typing. The full review will take a few business days, but the notice won't progress. Margot watched him. Why? She asked. He looked up. Because it shouldn't have progressed at all. That's not what I mean, she said. I mean, why you? Why now? You're a regional director. You're not the person who handles this. He didn't have a clean answer. He said the true one instead, because your daughter asked me a question in a parking lot, and I didn't want to lie to her. Margot looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Lily, sleeping with her cheek against the fleece of her jacket. She does that, Margot said softly. She finds the one person in a room who might actually listen, and she asks them the one question no one else thought to ask. Dominic finished typing. He sent the internal flag, the enforcement hold, the case officer assignment his own name for now. He'd transfer it properly in the morning. Then he put his phone down and just sat there. Can I ask you something? He said. Margot tilted her head slightly. Your file says you work in long-term care, he said. Which facility? Lackridge Gardens, she said, out in Stony Creek. He nodded slowly. My mother was at Lakeridge Gardens, he said. 2 years ago, she had a stroke. She was there for 11 months. Margot waited. There was a woman on the night shift, Dominic said. She used to leave a small lamp on in my mother's room. Not the overhead, just a little lamp on the bedside table. My mother was afraid of waking up in complete dark after the stroke. He paused. I only know about the lamp because another patient mentioned it. The nurse never said anything. She just did it, every night. He looked at Margot. "Was that you?" he asked. Margot was quiet for a long time. "I don't know your mother's name," she said. "Helene," he said. "Helene Bauer." Something moved across Margot's face, not quite recognition. Something softer. "I remember a Helen," she said quietly. "We're not supposed to have lamps from home. They're a liability. I brought one anyway." A pause. "She told me once that the dark made her feel like she was already gone." Dominic looked at the floor. "I'm telling you this," he said, "not because it changes anything professionally. It doesn't. Your file stands on its own. What happened to your submissions was wrong regardless of who you are." "I know," Margot said. "I'm telling you because I needed you to know that I'm not—" He stopped. "That this isn't the whole picture of what the institution is." He stopped again. He knew how it sounded. He knew it was inadequate. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "No," Margot agreed, "it doesn't." But her voice had changed very slightly, not warmer exactly, less braced. Lily stirred. She opened her eyes and looked at Dominic with the clear, uncomplicated gaze of someone who had just woken up and hadn't yet remembered what situation she was in. "Is the house okay?" she asked. Dominic looked at her. "For now, yes," he said. "We're going to make sure." Lily thought about this. Then she picked up her coffee cup from the floor, took a small sip, and made a face. "It's cold," she said. "I can get you something from the break room," Dominic said. Lily looked at her mother. Margot nodded once. Dominic got up and went to the small kitchen behind the branch. He found hot chocolate packets, the kind with the little marshmallows, and made one in a mug with the Cornerstone Trust logo on it. He brought it back. Lily accepted it with both hands. She looked at the logo. "Cornerstone," she said. "What does cornerstone mean?" "It's the first stone laid in a building," Dominic said. "It sets the position of the whole structure. Everything is built from it." Lily considered this. "So if the cornerstone is wrong," she said, "the whole building is wrong?" Dominic looked at her. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly right." He drove home that night in the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace. He sat in his driveway for 6 minutes before going inside. He thought about the 3 hardship submissions sitting in a file, all received, none actioned. He thought about the pipeline. He thought about the fact that Margot Vaillancourt had called 3 times, faxed once, come in person once, and the system had processed all of that effort into a neat administrative nothing. He thought about Lily asking him what cornerstone meant and giving him the answer. He thought about his mother's lamp. He went inside and opened his laptop and spent 2 hours pulling data he didn't normally look at: hardship request completion rates, average time from submission to case officer assignment, percentage of enforcement notices issued within 90 days of a first ever missed payment, for clients with clean payment histories of 12 months or longer. The numbers were not good. He wasn't surprised. That was the worst part. He wasn't surprised. The next morning, Dominic arrived at the regional office at 7:15. He asked his assistant, Fernanda, to block his 8:30. At 8:30, he called his counterpart in retail operations and asked for the processing data on hardship requests across all Hamilton area branches for the past fiscal year. His counterpart sounded cautious. This wasn't a standard request. Dominic said he understood that. He got the data by 10. At noon, he sent a summary to the VP of Retail Banking with a subject line that said, "Systematic gap in hardship request processing requiring immediate review." The VP called him within 20 minutes. The call was not comfortable. The VP was a careful man, careful with words, careful with implications, careful with anything that might travel upward and reflect poorly before there was a strategy in place to manage the reflection. He talked about liability frameworks. He talked about the complexity of mortgage servicing at scale. He talked about what it would mean to open an audit. Dominic listened to all of it. Then he said, "A client with a 16-month clean payment history received a notice of intention to enforce security after 14 days late, while 3 hardship requests sat unassigned in her file. She works 2 jobs. She's a sole caregiver to a 7-year-old. He paused. "I want to know how many more files look like this." There was a silence. This will require a board-level sign-off to investigate, the VP said. Then let's get board-level sign-off, Dominic said. Another silence. Dominic, the VP said, you understand what you're opening. I understand what's already open, Dominic said. I'm just the first one looking at it directly. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Dominic spent the weekend preparing. He didn't sleep well. He sat at his kitchen table on Sunday morning with the data laid out in front of him and thought about the fact that he had been regional director for 3 years and he had never pulled these numbers before. Not because they were hidden, because no one had asked him to pull them, because the pipeline ran and the metrics looked clean and the quarterly reports showed what they were supposed to show, and no one had stood in a parking lot and asked him about a purple door. The Cornerstone Trust Board convened in a glass-walled room on the 14th floor of a building on King Street. There were 11 people at the table. Dominic was not one of them normally. He stood at the front with a single slide on the screen behind him, not a deck, just one slide, with 4 numbers on it. He told them what the numbers meant. The chair of the board was a woman named Beverly Orr. She had run credit unions before moving to private banking, and she had this specific quality of attention that comes from having made consequential decisions long enough to understand that consequences are rarely finished. She asked him 3 questions. The first was about the processing gap. The second was about timelines for remediation. The third was, how many clients are currently in enforcement proceedings that originated from an unassigned hardship file? Dominic told her, 41. The room was very quiet. 41 families, Beverly Orr said. Yes, Dominic said. She didn't look at her colleagues. She looked at Dominic. What do you need? He had a list ready. Immediate freeze on all 41 proceedings pending file review. A dedicated hardship case unit, staffed and trained, operational within 60 days. A client notification process, direct, personal, not a form letter to every affected file. A public-facing plain language summary of hardship eligibility published on the website, updated quarterly, and an independent review of the processing system with results shared to the board and made available on request. One of the board members asked who would fund the operational costs. Dominic said, we look at the executive discretionary budget. The same board member said, that's not what that budget is for. Dominic said, I understand. I'd like to propose we use it for this. Beverly Orr called the vote. It passed. Dominic drove home and sat in his car again. He thought about how simple it had been, structurally. Numbers, a room, a vote. He thought about how long those 41 files had been sitting. He thought about how many parking lots he had walked through without someone stopping him. He thought about Lily and her question, which had not been a complicated question, which had been, in fact, the simplest question you could ask. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning, a letter arrived at Margot Vilecourt's house on the street with the purple door. It was on Cornerstone Trust letterhead, but it wasn't a form letter. It was 4 paragraphs signed by Dominic Bauer, Regional Director, explaining that a review of her file had confirmed the hardship requests had been received but not properly processed, that the enforcement notice had been void from the outset, that her account was in good standing, and that she was entitled to a refund of the late fee applied in October. The letter also said the processing gap that affected her file had affected others, and that the institution was committed to remediation that was direct and personal rather than procedural. There was a second, smaller envelope tucked inside. No letterhead. A card handwritten, for what it is worth, the lamp in room 14 mattered more than you know. Margot read both things standing at her kitchen counter. She stood there for a long time after. Lily appeared from the hallway, school backpack already on, one braid still half undone. What's that? Lily asked. A letter, Margot said. Good or bad? Margot folded both papers carefully and set them on the counter. Good, she said. Lily looked at her mother's face. Children are efficient readers of the things adults don't say. She put her arms around Margot's waist and pressed her face against her side, and Margot rested a hand on top of her head. Is the purple door staying? Lily asked, her voice muffled by fleece. Margot held her tighter. The purple door is staying, she said. On the 43rd day after the board vote, the Cornerstone Trust Hardship Case Unit sent its first batch of personal notifications. 41 letters, 41 phone calls, each made by a case officer, not a call center representative. 41 files reviewed individually, enforcement proceedings frozen, remediation offers calculated household by household. Dominic received a note from Beverly Orr 3 days after the letters went out. It was brief. Complaints are down. Call volume from affected clients is up. People calling to confirm their file is being reviewed, not to report new problems. Keep going. He kept it in the top drawer of his desk. He also kept something else, folded flat at the back of the same drawer, a piece of paper torn from a Coil notebook with a drawing on it in orange crayon, a house with a purple door, very tall, with a sun that was mostly off the page because it hadn't fit. Underneath, in uneven capital letters, "Thank you for listening to my question." Dominic had found it on the passenger seat of his car the morning after the parking lot. He didn't know when Lily had put it there. He thought about it sometimes when the work felt like paperwork, which was often. He thought about it when a call went badly, when a number was harder to move than he'd estimated, when someone in a meeting said the word sustainable and meant something smaller than people. He thought about what it had taken to change 41 outcomes. One question from a 7-year-old in a yellow rain jacket in a parking lot in Hamilton in November, in the dark, in the rain. And he thought about all the parking lots he still walked through every day and all the questions no one had thought to stop and ask him yet. He kept walking out of buildings and into the world, but he walked a little slower now. He kept his keys in his pocket longer. He didn't open his umbrella before checking who was standing in the rain. It was a small change. He knew it was a small change. But the cornerstone sets the position of everything built from it. And sometimes the cornerstone is just a question asked by someone who had nothing left to lose by asking. I keep thinking about the crayon drawing. A house with a purple door and a sun that didn't fit on the page. I don't know exactly when Lily put it on my passenger seat. I only know I found it the next morning and I haven't thrown it away. There's something I've been sitting with since that evening in the parking lot. Margot Vaillancourt did everything right. She called. She faxed. She came in person. She submitted the same form 3 times, and 3 times the system received it and did nothing. And yet she was the one standing in the rain trying to explain a bureaucratic failure to a 7-year-old who just wanted to know if her grandmother's purple door was going to survive the week. That's not bad luck. That's cause and effect. When a process is designed to receive information without ever being held accountable for acting on it, the outcome is predictable. 41 families, not 41 anomalies, 41 logical conclusions of a system that was never asked to look at itself. I think about what it takes to actually see that. Not just acknowledge it in a report, but see it. The colored binder clips on the fridge, the gas station coffee going cold, the child who counts her mother's symptoms the way other kids count stars. I had walked past versions of that reality for 19 years. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't indifferent exactly. I was just inside the pipeline, looking at what the pipeline showed me, which was clean metrics and quarterly reports and nothing about the 41. What changed was not complicated. Someone asked me a question I had no prepared answer for, and I stayed in the parking lot long enough to hear it properly. I think that's what integrity actually costs, most of the time. Not a dramatic sacrifice, just the willingness to stand still when everything in your professional training is telling you to keep moving toward your car. To crouch down to a child's eye level in a wet parking lot and say, "Okay, talk," and then to actually listen, which is different from waiting for your turn to manage the situation. What I kept coming back to, even in the board meeting, even in the data, was a kind of intelligence that had nothing to do with credentials. She understood the system that was failing her better than most people inside it did. She had documented everything. She had stayed precise and clear even when she had every reason to fall apart. That clarity, under that kind of pressure, is its own form of knowledge. It's earned. It doesn't come from a position or a title. It comes from having to figure things out when no one is coming to help you. And Lily. I think about Lily asking me what cornerstone meant and then answering her own question before I had the chance. If the cornerstone is wrong, the whole building is wrong. She was 7. She had never worked in banking. She just followed the logic of the word to its natural end. the way children do before they learn to leave certain conclusions unspoken. I wasn't the one who changed anything really. I was just a first person in that building who stopped walking long enough to let the question land. The purple door is still there. I know because I drove past the street once, on a Tuesday, on my way to somewhere else. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I just needed to see that it was still standing.